Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India Flight 171 and the report surrounding that tragedy. I'm Geoffrey Thomas and delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt, Germany. It is now good afternoon to you, Richard.
And good evening to you, Geoffrey.
Thank you. So, episode 153. Never before has a preliminary report said so much but revealed so little. There's never been a preliminary report that has provoked so much reaction than the Air India Flight 171 preliminary report. There's never been a preliminary report that has provoked more questions than the Air India Flight 171 preliminary report. The Minister of Civil Aviation of India stated it is just a preliminary report and it's inappropriate and premature to jump to any conclusions. It commends the AAIB of India for doing in quotation, excellent job under difficult circumstances in such a short time. The mainstream media and social media, however, are in hypersonic overdrive. I gave an interview to the BBC and others. Richard has given an interview to CNN and others. In my BBC interview, I summarised what the report tells us and point out what the report does not tell us. I was asked in particular about the fuel cutoff switches and whether they could be moved inadvertently. The FAA Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin from 2018 was discussed, and whether Air India checked the fuel switches and ensured they were working properly or not. Richard was live in Indian television on NDTV as an aviation expert, together with the spokesman from the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the head of Indian Airlines Pilots Association. Everyone with their version of the truth. It was a pilot, it was not the pilot. It was the aircraft, it was not the aircraft. It was the operator, it wasn't the operator. It was intentional, it was inadvertent. We are peeling layers off the onion, and tears are starting to well up. We have seen over 3,000 comments and questions from viewers in the past 48 hours. Everyone is asking who, what, why, and when. And even 5 viewers explained WTF. Switches, pilots, engines, fuel cutoff, FADEC. So, Richard, where do we start?
Good question. In the midst of everything that's going on, I think we're in information overflow to some extent. So I think we start with the information that we have and we check the sources of that information and the evidence in order to, do a verification check on that information. I think we look at the information that must be or should be available, but is not being published, and think about why it is being withheld. Obviously, there's quite a lot of misinformation out there, and we need to check what is correct and what is incorrect. And if it is incorrect, what's the correct version, and why is the misinformation being put out, and what is the agenda behind those who are putting out misinformation? I think we need to look at the open questions. And as you said, the report raises so many questions, and some of them we can answer and others we can't. And if we don't have an answer, then we need to think out, where are we going to get the information to be able to answer them? So quite a lot of work to do.
Does the NTSB or the UK AIB, as well as Boeing and GE, agree with the report?
Officially, no comments. They are all assisting and cooperating, and of course, they express their condolences. Unofficially, the Wall Street Journal, whose motto is "the source you can trust," says the NTSB threatened to withdraw their support and send their investigators back home. Unofficially, several people who are close to the investigation have also been in touch with both of us.
So tell us about the switches.
Yep, 904 viewers, comments, and questions on the switches. The obvious point, a switch can fail. We're showing a screenshot of the center pedestal from the captain's view. There is a spring-loaded mechanism in the switch, and of course that spring can fail. There was the FAA Aviation Safety Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin NM-18-33. A long list of the affected aircraft, but the Boeing 787-8 is on that list, therefore it's relevant. And I quote, "If the switch can be moved without lifting it up, the locking feature has been disengaged and the switch should be replaced at the earliest opportunity." We're showing another screenshot of the center pedestal in the cockpit from the first officer's view. Some viewers have commented about solder joints failing, and the FAA issued an airworthiness on the Boeing 757, 767, and 777, but not on the 787. So, yeah, a generic and perhaps not relevant. And it mandated repetitive inspections for damage, including arcing, loose terminals, or heat damage. And there was also a Boeing service bulletin and another one from the FAA, but this time referencing the GE90 engines, the 110B1 and the 115B, not the engines, the GE NX 1B70 engines on this particular crash. So again, generic, but they state analysis by the manufacturer found accumulated thermal cycles of the MN4 integrated circuit in the FADEC causes the solder ball joints to wear out and eventually fail over time. We're showing another screenshot, this time of the center pedestal in overview. And there have been several points made about the maintenance and replacement of certain items. And as per the information from Air India, the suggested inspections were not carried out in line with the SAIB advisory because it was not mandatory. The scrutiny of maintenance records revealed that the throttle control module was replaced on the VTAMB aircraft in 2019 and again in 2023. And the preliminary report notes, however, the reason for the replacement was not linked to the fuel control switch. But of course, the fuel control switches are included in the modules, so they got changed. And there has been no defect reported pertaining to the fuel control switch since 2023.
So what about the pilots, Richard?
Well, we had 826 comments and questions about the pilots. It's not obvious to most viewers that actually there are 5 seats in the cockpit. So we have the 2 main pilot seats, captain and first officer, and we're showing a screenshot of those. And then there are 2 forward-facing seats at the back of the cockpit, and they're intended for relief pilots or observers. And we're showing a screenshot of those. And then there's a fold-out 5th seat, which is not visible in the picture, in the stowed position, but on the 787, it's near the cockpit door and can be deployed when the cockpit door is closed. And that provides an additional certified seat with the usual harness. The report states that there were only 2 flight crew on board, and there doesn't make any mention of any observers or any relief crew. So we assume there were no observers, no relief crew. And therefore, with only 2 people authorized to be in the cockpit, I find it a bit of a strange statement that they say in the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots, unnamed, is heard asking the other pilot, unnamed, why did he cut off? And the other pilot responded that he did not do so. Begs the question, why no release of the cockpit voice recorder? Because there are 2 microphones, one on the co-pilot side, one on the captain side, and it would be very easy to work out who said what and when. Alternatively, a transcript of the CVR if they don't want to actually publish the audio. The report states on the captain that he held an ATPL license, Airline Transport Pilot License, and valid for 5 years from the 11th of May 2021. The license validity before 2014 was for 2 years, then it got extended to 5 years, and then in 2023 it got extended to 10 years, but not retrospectively. So anyway, the captain was licensed and he was 56-year-old and he had a valid license lasting 5 years. And likewise, the first officer, who was 32-year-old, also had a valid license. And the captain had been flying for 24 years longer than the first officer and had accumulated 15,638 flying hours. And that's 12,235 hours more than the first officer, who had 3,403. And the report states 263 hours for the captain in the last 180 days, which works out roughly at 533 hours a year. And if you take the 24-year difference between their ages and divide it by the difference in flying hours, lo and behold, you find the average rate over the period of 24 years was 510 hours per year. So it all ties up, and it shows that the captain was consistently flying around 500 hours a year, and he'd been doing that for 31 years. So he was highly experienced, and he had a consistent track record of flying over that 30-year period. The first officer, flying for around 7 years, obviously less experienced, but equally consistent in his track record. So on the face of it, there's absolutely no issue with either pilot.
One comment, though, Richard, with the cockpit, while there was no relief crew or no check captains on board or whatnot, it is known, however, that from time to time, Air India and other airlines, for that matter, allow some of their cabin crew to be in the cockpit for takeoff and landing, just to familiarize themselves with the operation. So it could well have been there might have been an additional person in the cockpit from the cabin crew.
Yeah, obviously the cabin crew are authorized to enter the cockpit with the captain's permission, and for the reasons you point out. And there's no statement that there's any evidence of an unauthorized person entering the cockpit. And they do have video, security video, showing the cockpit door, and that was recovered. So I think we can be safe that only authorized crew members were in the cockpit.
Yeah. So what about the engines? What are the comments and how many comments did we get on the engines, Richard?
922 comments and questions. So people, I think, will appreciate we don't go through them one by one or not even take the best
No.
10 or something. Both engines were installed earlier this year on this aircraft. The left engine, slightly different than the right engine, but both were GE NX 1B70s. The left engine, 27,791 hours. The right engine, 33,439 hours. They've been through 4 or 5, 6,000 cycles. So the left engine was doing 6.5 hours per cycle, and the right engine 5.4 hours per cycle. So these engines were well oiled, so to speak. We are told all applicable airworthiness directives and alert service bulletins were complied with for the aircraft as well as the engines. And the report makes no comment as to whether there was any engine malfunction during takeoff, roll, or initial climb. And concludes at this stage of the investigation, there are no recommended actions to Boeing on the Boeing 787-8 or to General Electric on their GEnx 1B engine. So it looks like their evidence is everything was working fine. But we have analyzed the CCTV video frame by frame and have published our findings with 2 videos, one for each engine, and 2 PDF files where you can step through the relevant frames, frame by frame. The report does give the timing from takeoff clearance right through to when the EAFR recording stopped. And we have included in our analysis a timing of from the report versus the CCTV. And there's a possible right engine failure and a possible left engine failure. The right engine just on the rotation, and the left engine just a few seconds later. Now, I've synchronized the data we've had from the CVR and FDR and the ATC from the preliminary report with the ADS-B data we have and with the CCTV, which shows a time to the nearest second when it starts. And they all align to within 1 second. So it's not totally accurate to the nearest millisecond, but I think it's accurate to within 1 second. We're showing a screenshot of this timing analysis, and the key findings, there are 10 of them. 1, the right engine may well have failed 1 second after the transition from ground mode to air mode. The left engine may well have failed 4 seconds after the right engine. Both engine fuel switches went from run to cutoff within 1 second of the left engine failure, so the second of the 2 engine failures. The RAT deployed 3 seconds after the left engine failure. The engine 1 fuel switch went from cutoff to run within 5 seconds of the RAT deployment. The APU inlet door opened after another 2 seconds. Engine 2 fuel switch went from cutoff to run after another 2 seconds. The Mayday call came after another 9 seconds, and the crash occurred after another 4 seconds. And then the EAFR stopped recording 2 seconds after the crash. So everything happened in very quick succession, and there was insufficient time, airspeed, and altitude to be able to react to save the aircraft.
Richard, what about the FADEC? Was the fuel cutoff automatically done by the FADEC or manually done by one of the pilots or both?
Well, the fuel cutoff function, as opposed to the fuel cutoff switch, um, the fuel cutoff function can be done automatically by the FADEC for each engine separately if it detects damage or fire or a major problem with the engine. The preliminary report states the switches were transitioned, and one pilot asking the other, why did he cut off? And the other one responding, he didn't. So, I mean, Geoffrey, if I ask you, did you press the record button for recording this episode? And you say, no, I didn't. Then we would very quickly conclude it was inadvertent, and you would then press the record button and we carry on. The cockpit communication sounds to me as if it was an inadvertent uh, transitioning of the switch. The preliminary report also quotes the data from the flight data recorder and talks about engine N1, engine N2 began to decrease from their takeoff values as the fuel supply to the engine was cut off. And it then talks about the engine one switches being moved from cutoff to run. And we've been through the time sequence with the other events, the APU start and the RAT deployment. So all of this detail put together shows me that both the FADEC was managing an automated shutdown and relight and thrust recovery sequence, as well as manual switches were being positioned and selected in the cockpit. So the answer to your question, both automatic and manual. Where does that leave us? The first officer is the pilot flying. The captain is the pilot monitoring. And as the captain would be monitoring, he would be looking, for example, at the ICAS messages from the FADEC. Engine fail, left, engine fail, right, or the other way around. The captain would then expect to see FADEC message engine auto start. And if the captain then sees engine fail start from the FADEC, then he would cycle the fuel switch, run to cut off, and then back to run, because that forces the FADEC to do a manual restart.
Who or what switched the fuel off, the captain or the FADEC or both, and in what sequence?
Yeah, well, I think it's both. And then the question is, in what sequence? Some analysts say it's quite clearly intentional because the sequence was so short. But I'm not so sure it was intentional. It could also be inadvertent. And we've stated in a previous episode, the run cutoff switches themselves are not motorized. They cannot be physically moved automatically by the FADEC or any other avionic or thrust management system. They are manually operated switches. The electronic engine control system, the FADEC, can independently shut off fuel flow to the engine under certain conditions without those physical switches being moved. And the FADEC can do that if there's a fire and the fire handle is pulled, if the engine goes into overspeed or indicates severe damage or major failure conditions. So the FADEC will then respond, switch off the fuel, shut down the engine, and then automatically go into the relight logic. And if the relight is unsuccessful, the FADEC will report on the ICAS that the relight was unsuccessful. And there is, in my mind, from the clear evidence from the video analysis that we've shown, that there was at least a single engine failure, then quite possibly a dual engine failure. The first engine failure just prior, so just after V1, just prior to rotation, and 4 seconds later, as we said, then the second engine failing. There is nothing about a single or a dual engine failure in the preliminary report, although they do analyze CCTV footage because they talk about the rat being deployed and they work that out from the CCTV footage. The FADEC system response aligns exactly with the Boeing flight crew operating manual. It's exactly what the pilots expect to happen, and it's exactly what we observe in the CCTV video. I'm not sure why it wasn't obvious to the investigators.
So, Richard, what is your conclusion at this stage of your analysis?
Well, I note that the fuel is still being checked, and there's an analysis of samples of fuel that they recovered, and that's still underway. I also note there's a NOTAM A1012-25, which was published on the 18th of June, 6 days after the crash for Ahmedabad Airport, and warning of bird concentration near aerodrome. And that's valid for the next 3 months. So I find it could be just coincidence, of course, that it was brought out on the 18th, but maybe it's also connected somehow. I found a very interesting Boeing 787 pilot in YouTube by the name of C.W. LEMOINE, who's published a video where he walks you through what goes on in the cockpit from when you get clearance for takeoff right through the takeoff roll and the initial climb. And he sets it out line by line, and I think it's very helpful to go through. So the captain does the taxiing, and he lines up the aircraft on the runway for takeoff. And when they get the clearance, he says to the first officer, "Your aircraft," and the first officer advances the throttle to 40% and waits for the engines to stabilize. And then he hits the toga button, the takeoff go-around thrust. Captain calls thrust set. First officer responds thrust set, and takes his hand off the throttle, and the captain puts his hand on the throttle because the captain is responsible for any abort that they may decide during the takeoff procedure. The captain calls V1 when they reach that speed, and he then takes his hand off the throttle because after V1 you can't abort, and the flight first officer will put his hand on the throttle again, and the first officer is supposed to be ready for that action and have his hand in a so-called guarded position, ready to go. When the captain takes his hand off, the first officer immediately puts his hand back on the throttle. The captain will then call positive rate when they start to climb, and the first officer will confirm positive rate, and then the captain will call gear up, and the first officer will say, "Okay, select gear up." There are quite a few videos, by the way, out there of a takeoff in a Boeing 787 in YouTube, so you can follow exactly how it's done. C.W. LeMoyne concludes that, in his opinion, this whole saga about was was the fuel cutoff intentional or inadvertent? He says intentional. I think it might still be inadvertent if there was a failure in the cutoff switches, but Mr. Lemoine points out, for both cutoff switches to be failed, or where the spring mechanism doesn't work properly, it's like a 1 in a million chance. But until we actually know, the jury's out. And he points out in his video, we might never know. What we do know is that the run to cut off for both engines was within 1 second, according to the preliminary report. And what we also know is the cutoff back to run was 9 seconds later on engine 1 and 13 seconds later on engine 2. And this appears to me as not a hurried within 1 second type action, but 9 and 13 seconds. And I think, the jury may still be out, but I think both pilots were actually unaware and thought the other had accidentally and inadvertently knocked the cutoff switch, and then they were just at the wrong moment in the relight and trying to save the aircraft situation. I'm not saying that's what's happened. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
Yes, as we discussed earlier, the preliminary report has thrown us some bones, but there's no meat on the bones. There's a lot of information missing to make an accurate assessment of what's happened. We're all grappling with, how we understand this.
Yeah. And when you see our viewers alone have got 3,000 comments and questions, and when you look in social media elsewhere or in the mainstream press, you got millions of questions being raised. And this panel that I was on yesterday in Indian TV, they had their list of 10 open questions that they wanted answering, and everyone has got loads of questions.
Well, I sincerely hope that the Indian AAIB, with the tsunami of question marks raised from this preliminary report, brings out another interim report which starts to fill in some of the gaps so informed decisions can be made, and the travelling public can be absolutely assured that travelling on a Boeing 787 is a safe mode of travel without any question whatsoever.
Yes, and the minister did hint there might be another report after 3 months. And if we had, for example, the transcript of the CVR and the key data from the FDR, the transcript of the ATC communication, then we'd start to be able to answer a lot of these open questions. But as you point out, they just threw us some bones, and there was no meat on the bones.
Exactly. So, viewers, that's all we've got time for today. A very big thank you to Richard for some amazing analytical work today, working through this report, trying to make sense of it when it's almost impossible to make sense of it. So, viewers, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't, please do. Please keep those comments coming. We really do appreciate them. There are so many of them, it's impossible for us to respond to them. And thank you also for the fabulous questions. And also lots of people are now emailing us questions. And these are very detailed questions and detailed analysis. And we do really appreciate it very much. Richard, yeah, we've been kind of overwhelmed, have we not?
Yeah, and on one hand, it's wonderful, but we should let the viewers know, and those who are emailing us directly, because we put our email addresses up in the description below. It's just we're not answering you because we're trying to be ignoring you. It's just there are so many hundreds and hundreds of questions. We
Mm.
just overwhelmed by it.
But thank you, and please keep them coming. We do read way, way, way more than we actually answer, but we do
Yes.
appreciate them. We really do.
Yeah,
So,
we do try to go through every single comment and question, and we try to draw out then the major themes from
mm.
all of the comments and questions, and those themes form the next episode.
And talking of the next episode, we'll be back tomorrow, will we not?
Yeah, and we'll
Yeah.
work out what the themes are tomorrow.
Yes. So please, viewers, please do tune in tomorrow. We look forward to your company. And thank you once again, Richard.
You're very welcome.
And thank you, viewers. Take care.